Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about turning a fraction into a decimal and then into a percent. Okay, so we're going to dive right in today. Please be mindful if this goes a little slow. Be mindful it's intended to go slow so that way people who are really struggling with this concept can take their time going through every single step. So let's go ahead and talk about fractions and turning them into a decimal first, okay? Traditionally, in elementary school, we are taught that if, let's just do 6 over 10, this is really easy to turn into a decimal. This 10 actually means this is our whole, okay? It takes 10 to make a whole, but we only have 6 out of 10. And what this 10 represents is it actually represents our place value. And I'm going to put a decimal here. And this is the 10th place. Okay. So if we have 6 over 10 or any number over 10, it's very easy to turn it into a decimal. All that we have to do is to take the 6. It ends in the 10th place. So we would just take the 6 and we would plug it in right here. And our answer would be 0.6. Okay. Traditionally, most kids going into 6th grade have been taught this way to figure out fraction to decimal, and they've seen it more often than not this in this pattern. Okay, so then another example would be is if I had, let's say, 75 out of 100. Okay, that's another way that's really easy to turn a fraction into a decimal. Okay, it's already set up in the traditional mode of being over 10 or over 100. And if you remember with our place value, this is the hundredths place. Okay, the hundredths place. So when we say this, these are actually really easy right here because it reminds me of pennies. It takes 100 pennies to make a whole dollar. So in this case, we only have 75 pennies, so we do not have a whole. So when what I can do is I can just, since it's out of 100, I know that this is the 10th place and I know that this is the hundredths place. I can go ahead and just plug in my 75 to where it falls and ends on the place value that is listed in the denominator here. Okay. So whenever something is over 6 out of 10, 6 out of 100, even 6 out of, or a number out of 1,000, okay, because this is a thousandths place. Okay, it's very easy to convert a fraction into a decimal. Okay, but sometimes that's not the case. It is not always over a 10 or over 100 to where we would just plug this in. And what you can do is if you're struggling with this, okay, and you do not know how to do this, I'll be uploading some videos and some lower grade level material so you can go back and refresh yourself on that. Okay, so what do we do though if it's not over the 10 and it's not out of 100 and it's not out of 1,000? What do we do? Essentially, what's happening and taking place in these problems up here is that we're just dividing. We're doing 6 divided by 10. And that's how we're coming up with 0.6, okay? For example, if I did 10 into 6, okay, I'm going to bring up my decimal. I'm going to raise the roof, bring my decimal up because 10 does not go into 6, but we can bring a 0, but 10 does go into 60. And here we go. I got 0.6. So essentially what is really happening is you're dividing to figure out these answers, but because they're out of 10, because they're out of 100, because they're out of 1,000, it's very easy. We can just go ahead and plug in those numbers into the correct place value to find the decimal. So let's look at a different problem. So that way, and I put this into steps for you again. I always try to give clear and defined steps for you so you can know exactly what it is that you're supposed to be doing, okay? So step one, you're going to make sure that you have a fraction. If we're going from fraction to decimal, obviously we need to start out with a fraction, okay? But sometimes you may not start out with fraction. Maybe you have a decimal or and you need to go to percent. But then maybe sometimes you have a fraction, you got to go all the way to percent. So we'll, based on this, on these steps, you can kind of see where you'll need to jump in. But first of all, let's just say that we are starting out with a fraction and we need to go all the way to a decimal, or maybe your teacher wants you to show in fraction form, in decimal form, and in percent form. This would be the circumstance to use a fraction, what we call FDP, fraction to decimal to percent. Okay. So what I like to do is, because I do not like to deal with big numbers, is I like to start step one with reducing your fraction. If you don't remember how to reduce fractions, we will have some videos in some lower grade level content because that is a fifth grade skill. So here we go. Let's go ahead and start out with reducing in step one. We're in step one right here. We're going to reduce our fraction, meaning we're going to put this into a smaller equivalent fraction that's easier to work with. Okay, so here we go. So I'm looking for a common factor between 6 and 30, okay? And here's my factory. I like to make my factory here, okay? And we're making 30 and we're making 6. Some of y'all know that already in the lower grade levels or who work with me on a regular basis, okay? We have one times 6 here. Oh no, having a pen issue again. Looks like it's going to be time to get a new pen. Okay. 1 times 6 is a factor, and then 5 times 6 is a factor, okay, of 30. And that's going to be our greatest common factor. And I'm not going to take the time to do all the factorization there. I will put out a separate video about that if you do not know how to reduce fractions, okay? So 6 is the greatest common factor of 6 and 30, okay? And we're going to go ahead and divide both of these by 6 because 6 is our greatest common factor, okay? A lot of times your numerator will be your greatest common factor. So if I divide 6 by 6, I'm going to get 1. And if I divide 30 by 6, I'm going to get 5. And I like doing it this way down here because it lets you know what number is going to go in the numerator and in the denominator right here, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and erase that so we're not distracted by that. So we reduced our fraction already, okay? So step 2, I'm going to go ahead and do a different color here so we can know what is happening. We're in step 2. It says, then divide the numerator by the denominator. I call the numerator the nodder, okay? It's on top. Got your nodder. And then I always call your denominator your dancer, okay? Which is on the bottom, which is your bottom, okay? And that's a really good way to just remember it and memorize it. And so we're going to put our top number always goes inside the box when we're dividing, because the way we say this is 1 divided by 5. This line right here means divided by. So in the box, I'm going to write 1, and then I have divided by 5, okay? So obviously 5 does not go into 1. So I'm going to add a decimal, and I'm going to raise the roof. I always do that first. And I'm going to put a 0 here because 5 times 0 is 0 and does not, because 5 does not go into 1, okay? So now I'm going to add a 0 over here, and now I can go 5 into 10. How many times does 5 go into 10 without going over? It goes in twice. So here we go. 5 times 2 is 10. Then I'm going to subtract and I have 0. Okay, and there's nothing else to bring down, so I am done and I have no remainders. Okay, so I am done. Okay, so we have our decimal now. So your teacher may say something like, okay, list the fraction. I would put my fraction maybe in reduced form here for my teacher. And then I'm going to put my decimal number here. And then now maybe she wants her percent to go here. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we change our decimal, which is 0.2, to percent? Okay, so I'm going to start out with 0.2 down here. Okay, and this is very simple, this last step. Okay, it says multiply the decimal by 100 to get the percent. You could set it up and do it like this if you would like, and go through all the motions of multiplying all of that out to get your answer. Okay, you could do that. Okay, but whenever you're multiplying something by 100, really all that you're doing is your decimal is moving to the right 2 times. Okay, it's moving from here over and then over again twice. Okay, and you're going to get the exact same answer. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do here today. We're going to take the shortcut because it's easier. I'm going to take my decimal and I'm going to move it right 2 times. So 1 and then 2. And my decimal is going to go right here. And then I probably should have put a 4th step there for you. Go ahead and fill in your ghost zeros. Okay, there's a 0 that should go there now because we moved it over and there was a blank space. I call those the ghost zeros. Okay, and then I'm going to circle my new number because remember, this decimal isn't here anymore. It moved over twice. So my new answer is 20%. Okay, and that my decimal ended there. Okay, so real simply put, that is exactly how to go from fraction to decimal to percent. Okay, and we started out here, like I said, with reducing our fraction. We got 1/5, then we divided it out to get a decimal. If you do not know how to divide, you'll have to go back to some of my other videos and look at that to remember how to divide and bring your decimal into play if need be. Then we're going to multiply it by 100, or the shortcut form is to move the decimal to the right twice. I hope this helps. We now have our fraction, our decimal, and our percent.